Greetings from hot and dusty Alamogordo, New Mexico.
That's an understatement.
It is. I mean, we are in the desert, and we've been in the desert for weeks now, traveling through Texas and New Mexico. But New Mexico has been very dusty. I posted a thing on Instagram and Facebook with some pictures and said, New Mexico's been giving us some beautiful sunsets, and I've really liked those. But when you look out through our skylight on the Airstream, I mentioned on that post, I said, it looks like a portal to like the 1930s Dust Bowl.
Oh, everything is just coated around here. Like you can't touch the trailer, you can't touch the van, you can't touch anything.
The dust aside, it's been a really nice area. We have been at Oliver Lee Memorial State Park in Alamogordo for 4 days.
5 days. We got here Wednesday. It's Sunday, Monday. I don't even know what day it is anymore.
The dust and the heat blotted it all out. But yeah, no, it's been a really nice campground. It's not very big. It's nice and quiet. There are some sites like the one we're at now has electric and water, only 30 amp. And it's kind of on the upper loop. And then there's a lower loop that is both tent and RV sites, but there's no hookups down there. And we actually did 2 days down there because the park was really busy. So I got 2 nights in a non-hookup site, and then we moved up to the site with hookups for 2 more nights, just because that was all that was available.
Yeah, but you can't go wrong with the site here because you've got the Sacramento Mountains on one side, and then which is gorgeous. So if you're right up along the hill, that's your back door. And then you've got gorgeous views of Alamogordo and White Sands down the other direction. So you really can't go wrong. And you are not on top of your neighbor. And because of the loops, there's like nobody behind you in the middle ever. The main draw here in the Alamogordo area is White Sands National Park and the White Sands Missile Range and Holloman Air Force Base, all kind of tied together. But there's also quite a few other things to see and do here in the area if you have a few days.
You say White Sands. I thought the big draw was the world's largest pistachio.
I mean, we've been seeing signs for it all the way since Carlsbad. So, yes.
So, yes, there is a pistachio farm here, and they have the world's largest pistachio structure. I don't even know what it's made of.
It's a sculpture. I don't know. It's actually only been here for... Well, I don't know. I think they said 2008, maybe. I'm not actually sure.
But other things, while we were here, we went to see the New Mexico Museum of Space History. I think is what
something like that.
Something similar to that. Anyway, that was really neat.
I really like that. It's not a large museum by any means, but it is 5 floors. They start you at the top floor, and then you work your way down through the floors. And each floor is kind of a different theme. So you've got the history of astronomy to begin with, a little bit of background on rockets and missiles and kind of how they work, the rocket science part of rocket science.
Which all got started here at the White Sands Missile Base. That's why it's such a big deal here.
And then there's some tributes to the different space missions and the astronauts and explorers and scientists over the years who have been a big part of the rocket science and the space program. There's a couple different little simulators that you can try to like land an Apollo lunar module or land a space shuttle, different things like that. And it's just really interesting. And there's the Astronaut Hall of Fame, Space Hall of
International Space Hall of Fame, I believe.
So yeah, anybody that's been connected to it. And then the cute thing is that Ham, who was the first
first great ape in space.
Yeah, first great ape. They had to clarify that. Anyways, Ham, who was trained here at White Sands Missile Range, is buried on the grounds. He made a successful trip to and from space, then lived out the rest of his life. And when he died, they buried him here at the Space Museum. So there's a little tribute to him out there.
So back to White Sands, because as you said, that is the main draw for the area. You can't get to the missile range, you can't get on the Holloman Air Force Base, but you can get...
unless you're in the military, maybe.
Well, yeah, that's a big commitment to be able to go in there. But you can get to White Sands National Park, which, in case you're wondering, as we did, it used to be White Sands National Monument, and actually the old monument signs are still up, because one of the rangers told me that when they switched it over to a national park in 2019, they've started putting in all the new signs, but the old signs have been there so long that they're historic, and they have to figure out what to do with them now. Speaking of White Sands, though, getting out there from Oliver Lee, it's 25 minutes, maybe? It's not very long. And it's I would say it's a good half-day park with a caveat. So it gets really hot here in the afternoon.
In the summer.
In the summer. And if you can get there in the morning to hike the trails, that's best because it's nice and cool. The sand is cool. It's a lot easier to do things out there. And if that's all you can do is that half day, do the morning, I think it's a good half day park in that you'll get to see a lot of what's out there. You'll get a good feel for it. If it's not as hot and you have a whole day, you said you'd turn it into a day at the beach.
Yeah, we sort of joke because it is Memorial Weekend, and the rest of my family in Michigan is at the beach this weekend. Like, they're camping on Lake Michigan at the beach. And so I was like, oh, look, I'm at the beach too. Just different kind of beach and no water. We saw quite a few people setting up canopies or setting up beach umbrellas with chairs and just hanging out in the sand. So you kind of jokingly could set up and have a day at the beach, a picnic. You just don't have any water. Just bring all your water with you.
The park has done a really good job. I mean, the dunes and the sand is everywhere, right? That's the whole point. But they have a ton of different parking areas and places, good-sized parking spots. Other times are, smaller parking areas. But you could find a place to kind of set up your little tent and pretend you're at the beach for the day. And a lot of people could do that and not be on top of each other.
Oh.
However, I will also point out, we went first thing in the morning. We were the first car. We're not necessarily the first car in, but we just drove right up to the booth, showed our pass, and in we went. When we were leaving at, what was it? It was a lunchtime, basically.
About noon, 1 o'clock.
Noon, 1 o'clock. There was a line to get in.
I couldn't believe the number of people that were coming in that late in the day, just considering how hot it was. So, I mean, obviously getting there early is the way to go no matter what, just for less people and the temperature.
Getting ready to do our first hike at White Sands National Park. Something interesting here, we always talk about hats, sunscreen, everything else, but the ranger was telling us yesterday, you have to worry about the sun from below here.
Yeah, because of the sand, it will reflect up. So they said make sure your neck, your legs, anything, that you wouldn't actually normally think of because the sun's up here, you want to take care of underneath as well.
Yeah, we'll have to test it. She said, because she knows we're from Michigan, and she said the sand won't be hot here like we're used to in Michigan because it stays cooler because it's white, but you got to watch for the reflection. So
I don't think it's white, but it's the type of sand. It doesn't heat up like our beach sand, because I was thinking, how are you going to hike on this? It's going to be hot. And she's like, no, it won't be. Well, we'll see.
Anyway, this is pretty cool.
But I found a beach. I mean, I found sand. It's Memorial Day weekend, and I found sand. So we're kind of pretending like we're at Lake Michigan, but there's just no water.
Yeah, you're not going to run down the hill into the water.
No, boo.
No. Well, there is some water here at White Sands, apparently. It does stay in the basin, but
very little.
Not enough to swim in. All right, let's go check it out.
We're doing the backcountry trail loop, and our markers are orange and the spade. And so that's what we have to look for on this trail. And they said if you can't see the next one of these, turn back, because you don't want to rely on your footprint. It's easily to get lost out here, apparently, because the sand dunes all start looking the same after a while.
Well, she said if it's windy, too, your footprints can actually disappear from behind you.
Oh, everything will do. Yeah. So definitely don't rely on any tracks or anything. So we got to keep the orange spade in sight.
At least I can walk backwards in this trail and probably not run into anything.
At least not for a while. Yeah, it's not like our normal, oh, look, there's a cliff and a big rock and a tree and a cactus.
Something interesting here when you're hiking the dunes is there is a trail, meaning you follow the posts, you don't get lost, but there's no actual trail across the sand dunes. So you see a little bit behind me, it's not quite as steep, and some people have decided to take that route. And over here behind Jesse is the steeper route, which I guess we're taking.
We don't have to. That's
it's up to, you know us, why not, right? But yeah, so you can kind of hike wherever you want. You just want to always make sure you can see the next marker so you don't get lost out here.
According to the park brochure, off-trail hiking is not prohibited. So you can do it and go where you want, but you really have to know your surroundings. So tell somebody where you're going, have a GPS, have a compass, because if you're not following those trail markers, now that we're out here, I can see how easy it would be to get turned around because it all kind of looks the same. But technically, yes, you can go wherever you want. You just have to be careful.
And remember, your footprints might disappear. Or the other thing to watch for is footprints of critters. We found little ones. I don't know, some little mouse or something.
Mouse or bird or something. They're really tiny. And then some bigger ones that could be a dog, but they kind of went off a long ways, and I never saw them come back. So I don't think they were somebody's pet. I think there was some creature out here.
There are creatures in the sand
night?
dunes.
Oh.
And they are in the night. Yes, they said most of them come out at night because only the humans are stupid enough to walk around out here in the middle of the sunny day.
Oh, well. So let's keep going.
It's what we do. An interesting part about the desert here at White Sands National Park is that it's at the bottom of a basin in the mountains. And so they said water actually collects here when it does fall. And there'll actually be small lakes and little ponds. And then if you dig down in the sand, you don't have to go very deep and you may find water. And you'll see as you're walking through the dunes, there's some kind of flat spots that look like they're almost damp. And I'm assuming that's where the water sat for longer and is still down there somewhere. The Native Americans used to come out here, said there is water, you just have to know where to dig, and apparently they knew. I mentioned the flat spots out here. It clearly looked like they had water underneath, and now we found an oasis.
Yeah, there's clearly water out here, and as little as it does rain, you can tell where it collects. And so you've got all these cactus and other desert life out behind me, the soap tree, yucca, and various things, which is kind of crazy that they're just growing here in the middle of the sand dunes. But it is a testament to that adaptation of desert life and how they'll make every little drop of water count out here. Goodness. That's kind of deep sand there.
It's only 2 miles, but it's 2 miles of nothing but sand.
Yeah, and we're not even a mile in yet. It's sure pretty though.
It's interesting how much some of it is so hard packed and the rest of it's really deep.
Yeah, I mean, most of your hills are deep as you're climbing, but then the sun is baking the top. Whee! This is a very different kind of sand because it's gypsum. So it's different than like what I'd see at home in Lake Michigan. And one unique thing about it is it's cool. We're used to our sand heating up and you'd barely be able to touch it with your bare feet or your hands even. And even though it's hot, sunny day out here, it's cool to the touch. And it's just really fine and pretty.
We walked by a hiker in his bare feet.
Yeah. Oh, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I touched the sand. I'm like, oh, this is cold. Like, I'd never do that at home. You burn your feet in an instant, and we have before. So I may take my shoes off at some point and hike barefoot around here just because I can. I'm barefoot in white sands.
One thing you'll notice here at White Sands is once you're away from the parking lot and most of the people, how quiet and still it is out here, except for some wind. Super quiet and peaceful. Just listen. Almost back to the parking lot. That was a cool little hike.
Yeah, it's about 2 miles round trip. This the backcountry camping trail loop. So there are backcountry camping sites out here, which would be really cool if you had a little tent and you came out here and camped in the sand and saw the Milky Way and the stars or the full moon, depending on the night.
Yeah, they said it's very different. If it's super dark and there's no moon, you'll get a Milky Way. Or they said that when a full moon is out, it's almost like daylight out here because it reflects off the white sand so much. So I could see both being really cool. And you have to get a permit and it's backcountry, but you're within, for the campsites, you're probably within a mile and a half of the parking lot. So it's not like you've gone very far. If you decide to bail at some point, you can do it relatively easy.
But this was a relatively easy hike. It says moderate because, you're going up and down the sands and you have to be aware of that. But it's not strenuous by any means. And just take your time and enjoy the scenery.
Plenty of water, hat, everything we always tell you about. Be safe.
Sledding in Michigan is usually done in the winter, not in May. But here at White Sands, that's the thing to do. So we've got our sled, we've got our wax, and we're going to go see what this is all about. Okay. Go. Oh, this is a bad idea. I'm not 12 anymore.
You'll remember that a lot more tomorrow.
Oh, it's hard then. It needs more of a soft ending. Ooh. button went right into my belly.
Now you have a belly button.
Aha! Oh, you were still filming? I already have one of those. I don't need another. Yes.
Any more thoughts,
Um,
suggestions, tips?
make sure you have the wax. Apparently, we were told put the wax in one direction, the way that you're sledding, and then it takes a little bit to get started because you've got to get right over the crest and then go. Maybe that's a little bit different than snow sledding where you can kind of just go. You have to be totally over the crest, pick up the momentum. And I found, this is just my experience, that your second or third or fourth runs are better once you've established a path. You got to break through the crust of the sand and get away from where the wind waves have been, and then keep following that same path, and then it will be a much smoother and faster ride. But a lot of fun. So pick up your sled, whether you grab it at Walmart or I think you can buy them or rent them at the visitor center. The campground we're staying at happened to have some on loan that you just grab for the day, so I didn't have to pay for mine. But this is definitely an activity that you're going to want to do here at White Sands.
After a couple runs down that hill yesterday, I kind of joked that I was like, oh, I'm going to feel this tomorrow. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I'm doing just fine. So it was well worth it. So much fun. I honestly really wish we would have had more time to do it. It was just too dang hot by that point, and I was done being hot and dusty.
Speaking of sledding, though, we have another travel tip, and that has to do with the sleds that you use. And if you can, bring your own. Even if you buy one at a local store somewhere and bring it with you and don't keep it, because it's a little pricey there at the park.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I knew you could rent or buy. No, we had brought them from the state park here. They just have them that you can pick up at the camp host site. But we talked to the lady at the store there, and she said it's $25 to buy the sled. If you return the sled, then you get a $5 credit to use at the gift store, or you can buy a used sled for $20. And I'm like, it's a freaking plastic saucer. You should be able to get it at Walmart for like $7.99. Now, there is a Walmart here in Alamogordo. We did not go there to find out how much they are. So maybe they have jacked the prices up because they know that's why you're using them.
Maybe, yeah, but keep that in mind if you're going to try that. Or if you stay here at Oliver Lee Memorial State Park, the camp hosts have sleds and the wax, and you can just borrow them for free and then return them when you're done. That's a really nice little treat that they have here.
Yeah. Because we had a few days here in Alamogordo, we wanted to check out other things. And there's quite a few places you can go here for just day trips. We had talked to one of the rangers at, I think it was Guadalupe National Park. And he had said, oh, if you're going up to that area, you need to go to the Smokey Bear Museum. You need to go to Lincoln, where the Lincoln County Wars happened. You need to go to Cloudcroft. So he gave us like this whole list of things that we should see and do. Well, luckily, we had a few days, so we did. We took a day trip, and we went and checked out all of these things. And what was nice about it, it was a nice reprieve from the desert atmosphere down here in Alamogordo, which is at 4,500 feet, because the mountains in the Lincoln National Forest are at about 9,000 feet. So it was much cooler. There was forest, there was trees. We got away from the dust for a little bit, and we had a really interesting day exploring history.
It was a really fun day trip, and I'm actually going to put together a blog post with some itinerary ideas and pictures and different things so you can see. So trekkers.org, watch for that to get posted. A quick break to move inside. We warned you it was hot here after the GoPro overheated
and shut down on us in the middle of a sentence.
We decided to come inside the trailer where it's a little cooler. What I was about to talk about was, you mentioned going up to Lincoln County. Well, Lincoln was the center of the Lincoln County Wars, and you've got the whole Billy the Kid saga with, Tunstall and McSween and Murphy and Dolan and all the factions that were fighting and everything that led to Billy the Kid and all of his killings. And it was just really cool to see that town.
It was really neat. I know nothing about that part of history. I'm learning it, and I learned a lot. The cool thing to me about going to Lincoln was the Wortley Hotel, because I am a Wortley, and apparently the Wortley Hotel was where they took the prisoners at the Lincoln County Jail over to eat lunch because they didn't have food at the jail. So anyways, they took them over to the Wortley Hotel where they got fed. And it was there one day that Billy the Kid broke out of the jail and shot some people. And the undersheriff was eating lunch at the Wortley Hotel and he ran across the street and Billy the Kid shot him and yada, yada, yada. Anyways, I just wanted to see the Wortley Hotel because why not? So, and now we have some history to do on our end to figure out if we're actually related to this person or not.
You can learn a lot in that town because you can pay for it. The whole town from border to border is now a state museum essentially, and it's controlled by a historical commission. And somebody who was working there said that they're very strict, so they can't really do anything to that town. It's almost like it's in a time capsule, and it's starting to wear down in places.
Yeah.
But they need to do something at some point to restore it. But for now, what's neat about it is if you don't pay for the museum tickets to kind of go in and out of all the buildings, they have a number of good signs outside of what was going on at the different locations. If you know that part of history, it is incredible to kind of stand on that street and see those buildings that have been referenced over time. And I don't know, I thought it was a good trip.
The whole point of this whole day of going and exploring was so that we could go see the Smokey Bear Museum, which was in Capitan.
Capitan, yeah.
And so that was really neat. If you're not familiar with the whole Smokey Bear history, Smokey Bear was actually created long before the real Smokey Bear came on the scene. It was a campaign to obviously help keep forest fires down. And then in like the 1950s.
The campaign started in the 40s, and in the 1950s is when the big fire started in the Capitan, was the Capitan Gap, I want to say.
Yeah, Capitan Gap. It was a huge forest fire, massive, and wiped out a ton of acreage. But they found the little Smokey Bear cub that was, he had been abandoned, and I think probably his mom, was lost to the fire. They rescued him, they nursed him to health, and then eventually he was transferred to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., where he lived out his life. But he had became the real-life mascot of the Smokey Bear campaign. And when he passed away at age 26, he was brought back to Capitan and he is buried on the grounds of the Smokey Bear Museum. We spent probably an hour and a half or so, and probably the majority of that time was me spent doing my Junior Ranger book, because now that we've discovered these, tip on this one though, normally when I do these at the national park, you fill out the pages, you kind of look, you turn it in, the ranger flips through it, yep, okay, you wrote something down, here's your badge. The gentleman at the U.S. Forest Service at the Smokey Bear Museum literally checked my answers. Like, he got out his book and he checked my answers word for word throughout the whole book. And I was like, wow, that was pretty impressive.
Hey, but that's because your certificate that you received gets stamped with a stamp of Smokey Bear's actual paw print.
Yes, that's
so it's
cool.
Full legit.
And they make you stand by Smokey the Bear and do the pledge and all the works. And so it was worth it because you actually really do learn a lot. It kind of forces you to read all the signs, watch the video, and learn the history. And we walked away knowing so much more about not just Smokey Bear, but the fire techniques and the history of the area and all of that as well. So like I said, I just find those fun to do as an adult just because you are learning the history. You're not just looking at all the pictures.
The whole Alamogordo area is a worthy stop. Spend a few days here. In the meantime, keep on trekking.
And remember,
only you can prevent wildfires.